So hey there, everyone. Good morning and afternoon. Thanks for joining our webinar today. I'm Wayne Griffenberg. I'm one of the Fusion 360 team at Autodesk, a technical specialist for Fusion 360. So thanks for taking some time to be with us today. We're going to dive into our ISO 9001 overview of the quality management system. Really kind of an aspect of how we work with that with Fusion team and other projects within Autodesk. But really, I just want to kind of express some of my background and the way I work with ISO on products in the past. So today we're going to talk about our quality management system. Let me bring this up. So I want to go over more of the whys of why would you want to use a quality management system for your products, and mostly focused on these places where we work with the ISO 9001 quality management system. We're going to kind of dive into what it's about. What is it? And mostly, I think we want to focus on, and I'm going to do most of it as an overview of why we would use a quality management system. The other part is kind of getting into how we can use it, how it would be an advantage to you to help you with your product development, planning your product out, working with it, documenting the different processes that you would use within your organization, and the important part of communication and collaboration with those processes. I know it sounds like there's a lot going on, but it's really, if it's daily work that you do every day, and having a good quality product that your customers can see the results when you implement. So let's walk through that process today. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background on myself. I started in the late 90s. I actually joined Penn State University, had some great teachers, some amazing people in my past who were very passionate about engineering. And if there's one thing I learned going to school for engineering, and I went more for applied technology and engineering, is that consistency and efficiency are the things that engineers and manufacturers love. It's something that goes hand in hand with product development and design and manufacturing. So I've learned a good bit from college, and then I joined the first company I worked with, which was Air Shields in Pennsylvania. It was a small incubator company. It wasn't that small, but I joined as a designer doing ECOs and RECs or RECs then ECOs on changing some of the incubators in the process. I learned a lot about how you apply ISO standards to those products. And my main focus there, and as I say, everything I learned in manufacturing, I learned in Joe Makowski's department. He's an amazing boss. And that was one thing throughout my career. I had great bosses who helped me learn and work with these processes. So my main focus was on hoods and panels and the airflow within the incubators. It was a place where we definitely wanted to see consistency and efficiency within that incubator. Really hit home. I have 4 kids. My older 2 were both preemies. A few weeks early, they were in our incubators. So it really hits home when your own kids are thriving and surviving from the work that you do. So I learned it really hit home to understand that process of how we can control design to keep that quality really high and work within a system like this. So, and that's where I applied. I learned more of the medical system, which is 13485, but there's a lot more processes involved. So then after about 10 years or so, I moved on to another company, which is an exciting startup, working with implant knees prosthesis, making the implants themselves and test equipment and the instruments. I learned a lot also about implementing those standard processes. Myself, Fred, Simone, Corey, we all worked together to implement from the get-go a quality management system because we were making implants. We're making things that are going inside of people. So it was really important that we had our quality and regulatory under control. So, and I learned a lot. So that's why I want to bring that forward. So I joined After that, about 5 years, we had a brand new knee system on the market. It was flourishing, and so I moved on more on the support for CAD and CAM. I wanted to um, bring what I've learned to other people. I want to express that and teach. So I had an opportunity where people who were using new CAD and CAM systems within and even simulation systems in their organizations, how they can use it with an ISO standard process, process that they were developing in their organization. Today, I've been with Autodesk for 5 years. I'm a technical specialist on the Fusion 360 team. I always think and help our customers think in terms of designing for manufacturing and what that means in an ISO standard point of view. So that's a background on myself. I'd like to kind of jump into the question of why. And with this, a little bit of an anecdotal story. A few years ago, my family and I, we went on vacation. And since I was about 15, I played guitar. My family plays guitar. I love playing instruments. And we were on vacation, and there was an opportunity to buy a ukulele for my kids and I to play. And we picked one up. The price was right, and we started to play it. Now, this isn't the ukulele. This is just a picture that I can put up there for visual. This is actually from our Autodesk gallery. I'm sure Scott's a great designer, but this isn't the one I picked up. The one we bought looks like this, but one of the problems was it wouldn't stay in tune. Like no matter, over time your strings have to stretch and so forth. But we would play it halfway through the song. We have to retune it. And being a musician, that's one of the core things about a product is it should be staying in tune. That's what you bought an instrument for, is to play music in tune. And it really hits home when it comes to quality, right? So, and I reached out later on after our vacation, and I still had the uke. I reached out to the company, and their website didn't really have any place for feedback. I gave them a call, and they weren't really interested in hearing what I had to say. They just kind of thought I was calling their babies ugly, which I wasn't. I was just trying to give some feedback to say, if you have a product that you make, you should put quality in there. I mean, would I be able to get another one that stays in tune? And it kind of shows you that at the end I was a bit of an unhappy customer. I probably won't go back to that brand again, only because of my experience. And this is a reality. Like, we all buy products, we all work with products, and some of us make products. And as within that world of quality, especially today's day and age, where social media can spread like wildfire, right? So if your product name goes out onto Instagram or TikTok and so forth as being a bad product, I mean, that hurts your business. So I mean, it makes sense to want to keep those customers happy and meet those expectations those customers have. Like, my expectation, simply, it should stay in tune. And if there's places where the neck starts to bend, and I noticed that even on the frets, they were a little bit sharp. I mean, your hands moving back and forth on the frets, to have them slice, your hands is not a good idea. So this is where I wanted to give that feedback, and of course we want to be able to do that, supply a quality product to our customers that our name is good. They see us as a good name brand, and keep that consistency and efficiency within our quality, and that keeps our customers happy. So we know that what we're making is a great product. Here at Autodesk, we know we make great products, and our customers let us know we're meeting those customers' demands and expectations. We listen to the feedback. We hear where the products need some love, and we put some focus and time, and we have a process in place to take that feedback, bring it back in, and really close the loop on that to fix the problems and make our customers happy. And so what is a quality management system? It is essentially, I went from the whys to the what. It is essentially that. It's basically a recipe of best practices. It's think of it as a list of those things that you can implement into your business to increase that consistency and efficiency for quality that your customers are looking for. So it all starts with what your customers are asking for, listening to that and delivering it. And your customers will be demanding just like we are, right? We buy a product, we want that product to hold up to that quality that we're paying for. And the same thing for our customers. And so, and it trickles down. So if you're an ISO 9000 approved or certified company, you want to use materials that come from ISO 9001 certified suppliers. And it goes all the way down to your product. And the weakest link is just that, right? So you want to make sure all your links are strong. So one of those places, and I just want to kind of jump into a quick overview, and then we'll jump into a product that I'm working on, which was that uke. So one of the places, and I remember Joe Makowski, I learned this in the early 2000s, was the KISS method, right? It seemed kind of funny, but I think you put it a little bit differently, but the KISS method is keep it stupid simple. Right, and I think at the time it was more like keep it simple, stupid, but either way, it works, right? So you want to keep it as simple as possible. Keep that process. It does sound like it's a daunting task to implement some quality management, but if you're already doing it, you know, implement it in such a way that makes sense for your business, right? So say what you do and do what you say. Right. And in this method, we want to keep our customers happy. That's ultimately it. We want them to return to buy our products over and over again. Right. So the way we do that is we listen. We ask them what they want, and more importantly, what they do not want. I don't want it to go out of tune. I don't want to scrape my fingers on the frets. I don't want frets coming out of the fingerboard. I don't want the bridge to detach, and I don't want the ukulele to warp. So these things are basics and on how a product works, but there's also service, right? I want to be able to bring that information back to the customer to say, am I satisfied? If I'm not satisfied, do you have something in place that you can now make, you know, the customer satisfied or future customer satisfied? Do you have a mechanism that you can take that and turn it around, right, to fix that issue that you're having with your ukes in this case? So we want to be able to, and those are the best practices, right? So we want to be able to understand what the customer wants, write them down. These are customer requirements, right? This is what your customer wants of you. So write it down somewhere, put it on a banner, put it in a process, right? So in this way, we communicate those customer requirements to our entire teams who are making the product. And of course, the last part there, making sure you have all the equipment, the safe environment, all the training. Do you have the right people? Do you have the right training to make sure that you can be consistent and effective and efficient in your process for the customer? The other part is like, you know, what if we miss something? What if something went wrong? What happens if we are having tuners that are becoming untuned, right? So what if our strings are loosening up? What happens after that process? What if you find defects that we know are within our product? Well, the best thing is to do and implement what they call as corrective action plan, which is great. Implement some plan, some measure, some way that you can collect the feedback from the customer, bring it back into your process and make those changes effectively. That's ultimately what the standard is telling you, right, as part of it. So, and especially in those places where it's important for safety of the customer, safety of your employees, and the safety of your business, right? So keep those things in mind and just put in a practice. It's your practice, it's your way, and make it work for your business. And these are really guidelines. There's nothing that's official, that's stamped, but if you, again, going back to the beginning, say what you're going to do and do what you say that you're doing, right? So, and this is one way to build in that quality. So, and if customers complain like I did a little bit, it was a good complaint, some feedback. Well, all complaints could be good if you think of it the right way, is giving some feedback system, some way to close that loop, to listen to the customers and put into your product a way to make those changes, but let your customers see it. Right, close that loop, get the feedback. And as I put here, feedback is great, but good feedback's awesome. Bad feedback, it's golden. You're hearing from customers exactly what you want to make and change in your products. Now, again, there's some places where customers may have some complaints, and sometimes they go into your product. Sometimes it's just about service. Sometimes it could be about the business itself. But again, listen to it. It's all trying to help you make a better product in the end. So just a few other best practices. Basically, if you implement just the standard practices for listening to your customer, having some feedback loop, some corrective and preventative actions, basically in your process, you'll find that you'll have less defects in your product because you've been proactive to fix them, less rework and scrap. Your overall manufacturing processes, the steps you take to make it, will be more consistent, more effective, more efficient. And therefore, you're going to have your products improved, and your customers are going to be happy because you're meeting their demands. You know, and how do we know it? Because they let us know. We're in that part of that feedback loop. So, and again, these are things we practice here at Autodesk as well, right? So we adhere to our standards, and it trickles all the way from the top down throughout our product. And this is something that we, within our product, will help you instill in your products as well and your processes. So these are some bullet points, but some always important ones. We don't have to go through all, but these places where having very well-defined roles and responsibilities. If somebody's responsible for those tuning pegs, have that role and clearly defined, you know, throughout your team. What's expected, right? So if there is a change that has to be made, does it get made, right? Is it just falling on deaf ears? You don't, and again, it all goes back to that process of making sure everybody's clear on what they have to do. And again, that trickles all the way down. And one important part is your external suppliers, making sure that they're following that same standard, that high quality. You want to find vendors if you're buying those tuning pegs, or if you're buying the strings or the bridge or other components of your design. In this case, I'm talking about the uke. If you're buying those, you want to buy from reputable suppliers, and the best way to see the reputation is, are they standard? Are they covered under ISO 9000? If they are, you know that they have a quality system built in. And it's more likely you're going to buy from those guys who already have a built-in inspection process and feedback loop versus ones who don't. You don't know what material that they're getting. They don't. It all goes right down to their base materials that they're purchasing themselves. So again, it trickles down. So keep those things in mind, and keep it simple. Keep it at a point where you're able to implement really quickly, well, shall I say really easily, throughout your organization, whether you're in a machine shop, whether you're making ukuleles, you know, if you're in an ice cream shop, and that's a good place to be. I like ice cream. So, but throughout any business, it's important that those quality standards stay high for the customer. And that's ultimately what a quality management system is bringing to you. Staying consistent, right? Staying efficient and effective in your processes. So just some more overview. And so this mission goes from the top of the company all the way down. When we say SOPs, we're talking standard operating procedures, so that each person or anybody along the line, the chain of what you're making, knows exactly their role and how to implement that repeatable process in each of their steps. And that's essentially what this other part of the ISO is bringing forth. Another part would be, as far as, like, you know, keeping consistent, places where you can bring it back, take that the customer feedback and put it into some way that you can measure, right? Some form of a continuous improvement for productivity. Not only will that go back in and change the culture of your business, it's also going to be a feedback system letting our employees know that they're doing the right job, they're doing the right thing. By implementing this, you're directly impacting the way our customer is going to be seeing us as a company, and keeping that same flow throughout your entire organization. And then this gives you some key buzzwords there, like KPIs and key performance indicators, and it seems like a little bit of a detached way, but it's actually completely integrated. It's a great way to have some metrics on how you're improving, and whether it's dollars, whether it's numbers, whether it's the number of positive feedback you get from the customer. All of these things all take part in your quality management system. So just to kind of, and I know there's a lot of slides here, but there's a lot of different clauses within the standard. I'm not going to go and dive too much into the standard. I'll give you an overview of what it looks like. I have a document that we can bring up, and I kind of walk through what it looks like, what a base standard would look like, and those steps that you could take to implement it into your business. But I just want to kind of give you some of the why, right? So an example, a real world example, and what that would be to be able to implement, and those steps you could take to make those best practices and put them into your business, and so specifically for your customer. So what is an ISO 9001 quality management system? So I'm going to dive into a product. I'm going to kind of walk through ways that we can use it within Fusion Team. I use a product that we use is called the Shotgun for doing our planning, and I'll walk into that process as well. But ultimately, we want to talk about, how could this help you with developing your product. So first, when you go, if you do a web search, and you'll see that there's a standard ISO standard organization out there. And they do have these family of quality management processes that you can purchase, and as well as you can also have someone help you implement into your business what those standard quality practices are. It is something that you can learn about and take on if you're a small business. Understand those different aspects. You're doing it anyway. You're purchasing components, or you're selling your products. You're manufacturing, right? So you have fabrication, you have quality checks, inspection, right? So purchasing, so sales, and all of these different aspects of your business, you can put that quality management into process, for each of those different aspects of your business. So this standard walks you through, gives you an overview, and basically a template that you can put in place in your business, and put those pieces in a controllable way, and in an efficient way as well. So so there are some information out there. There's a lot on what it is, and I just kind of walk through some reasons why you'd want to implement a standard of ISO 9001. It is laid out in a way that is easy to understand for most businesses. It's hard to capture because all these businesses are so different, right? So there's such a variety, and so many variables in different types of business, whether you're a website business, or if you're making parts for aerospace on machining and 3D printing. And so it evolves every day. So it's hard to have one standard fits all. I mean, ultimately, that would be great because, if one part, well, batteries do, but let's say one part of your car, a water pump, if you have one part fits every single car, out there, that would be the ultimate. You'd be, your product would be all over the place. But that would be a great thing. But the reality is that a lot of design and innovation happens over time. We find new ways over innovation. We find new ways to make products, new ways to develop them, and new ways that our customers are using them. So it's hard to find one standard that will fit like a puzzle piece. So there's some work that has to be done, some understanding about your business and what's important for the customer. And once you start there, get the customer requirements and understand, regulatory concerns, quality concerns, manufacturing concerns, can it be made the way you want to? Take those requirements first. And then from there, it trickles from there. You're always focused on what the customer wants first. And then let that drive the rest of your business. And that's essentially what you're putting in place, right? And that's what the standard is, right? So let me jump in. And I know the other half I wanted to talk about was looking at product design, planning tools that you can use to plan out and implement not only your quality management system, but even implement a new design process. And how we work through that as far as manufacturing, having those templates set up, and if you're going to 3D print, machine your components, or cast them, or even using tools like generative design to come up with new ways that you can even make some hybrid of machining, additive and subtractive. There are ways that you can set this up within quality management system inside of Fusion. And then at the end here, we're going to talk about some resources where you can get started with ISO 9001. So with that, I'd like to jump in and kind of give you an overview of the processes themselves. By the way, this is live, so if you guys have any questions, please feel free, ask some questions. Towards the end, I'll be able to go through and get some answers for you. And I appreciate your feedback, right? So as any of these processes, your feedback's important. So the next webinars we do, we take your consideration. We take that you're our customer today, and we bring that back. We get the answers you're looking for. We can massage the next webinar according to your feedback. So again, going through that whole loop, closing the loop to make sure that we get the information back to you to keep you, our customers, happy. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to bring up an Excel document because, well, I like Excel. I use it all the time. And of course, there are a lot of tools out there. But so anyway, so I kind of broke this down. This is well, I kind of paraphrased it, but this is the essence of the ISO standard for ISO 9001 2015. So ISO 9001 is part of a family of standards. So this one is more implementing a quality management system, but there are other standards for more peripheral steps in your business. And specifically, if you're working like I am on instruments, like musical instruments, there are ISO standards that are specific for like acoustics and the way you work with manufacturing guitars and lutherie and so forth. So and you want to follow those standards, just like there are for automobiles. Like we have SAE standards that connect to the ISO standards. So ISO is more global. SAE is more geared towards specific for not only just American, but for automobiles, and the standard for like bolts and different components that you can get into. So with that, this is a quality management system. As you can see, it starts off, a scope is what is this? What is a quality management system? Kind of gives you a scope of what your business would be as well. And it's just basically taking this template and bringing it into your business as well. So normative references and terms and definitions are essentially stating that although this is a formal system, it is a quality management system that you can implement and get certified on. But it lets you know, it's basically looking at it from a point of view that there are many different ways that this standard can be applied. Not one size fits all. Not all language is the same. In some places, you may have terms that would be work in one business that are different in another business. So this is just kind of defining what those terms are that make sense for your business, right? So you can define these here at this time and say, okay, I'm announcing, here's how we use this term. When I say, strings, I'm not talking about, subatomic particles and theoretical physics. I'm talking about guitar strings, right? So I'm just using that as an example to be facetious, but that's the idea. So when we talk about like things like terms and conditions, and then context of the organization. So these actually have some sub clauses in them, but these are your main clauses, right? So leadership. What is the what's the role of leadership in your business, like the CEO all the way down to the shop owner all the way down to the everybody peripheral in the business, including even external suppliers and consultants and so forth. And planning. How are you going to plan out your product? How are you going to plan changes, and how are you going to implement those? Organizational support. Do you have the right people in the organization to make sure that you're meeting those customer demands and expectations. Operations, this is where we kind of like the meat of our world, right? So in engineering, when we do some development and design, underneath the operations envelope, there's standards on how we're going to document. We have the same title block. We use a standard whether we're using inches or metrics, and of course, getting right into the heart of design. How are you going to implement that repeatable? Do you have a process? So every time you make a change, we have a customer feedback. They're requesting a change in our product. What does that formal request look like? And is the request being implemented? And how are you validating that change? Are you actually meeting the customer's requirements? And here's how you can monetize, but here's how you can put metrics upon that. And that's essentially what we're looking at is in operations, and it feeds back into design and innovation. If our customers are looking for something that's way out of our capability today, why can't we? Why can't we 3D print something? Why can't we come up with a new way to meet that customer's expectation? So then you have your products that you make, and they go through that same consistency and efficiency. And then you kind of have this world where it comes into new ideas. You're not stricken. You can explore, you can learn and come up with new ways, and just make sure that it's separate from the things you make every day. But that's that's your business. But that's where you would find that in essence under the organizations, or I'm sorry, operations clause 8. And then for performance evaluation, so we've made some changes. We've got products up to date. We got them up to speed. We're meeting our customer expectations. How is our performance? How that change we made, did it go well or did it go poorly? Right? We don't know because we just implemented it in our engineering envelope, but we don't know how it is in the customer or sales or even packaging. Are they now having a world of trouble trying to repackage that new guitar with 5 necks on it, right? So those things we get the feedback, and we also put in a performance evaluation. How are we doing as departments in a company? How is the company doing as in retrospect or looking at the change that we've done? How are we doing with our customers? Are we meeting their expectations? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? And then, of course, at the end is improvement. How do we make this process better? How do we make our product better? How do we implement those changes in the system itself? In the quality management system process gets also under focus. If we implement a set of processes that are going against the grain of what we're trying to do, how do we change that? Now, do we have a way and a scope into changing our overall processes? So hopefully that helps to kind of dig in a little bit and get an understanding of some of these terms and some of these ways that we implement. I can expand this out a little bit. After this webinar, I'm happy to share this. This is basically just the clauses listed and subclauses that get into some of the details, right? So under here, we have 5.1, leadership, their commitment from the top down. And we expand into planning. And what I wanted to show you is under operations. So this is where we talk about, like, if we're going to have planning and control, like, what does that look like as far as we'll use our incubator, or not, I work with incubators, but we'll use our ukulele is the word I'm looking for. We'll use our ukulele in this example. So what requirements for products? So our customer requirements, does it stay in tune, right? Does it hurt my fingers to play? Does the neck bend? Right? Is it wobbly? Does the bridge hold the strings properly? Does the strings pop every 8 minutes? So these things are requirements of a customer. These are requirements not only from the standability of our customer to be able to play it, but regulatory. Are we buying woods that are conducive to instruments, right? Are we painting them or using a shellac that meets regulatory requirements, right? So are we doing those things for safety? Are we doing those things that our customers need from us and implementing them into our design? So, and then here, design and development, products and services. So underneath this clause talks about steps that you can put into place to be able to design with consistency and efficiency, ways that you can document your design, and you are the one who writes the rules. You, the quality manager in your department or in your company, are the ones that help everyone to write those rules, to say, here's exactly what we're going to put in place for consistency. Here's how we're going to put a corrective and preventative action into place, that our customers give us feedback. Here's the steps we're going to take to make sure that that feedback gets back into the product. There's going to be a review of everybody from the applicable departments reviewing it to say, yes, that's a change we need to make, or no, we don't want to make that now, but we can push that down. These things, these choices, all come back to that standard process that you put in place, and then it churns through that machine, right? So this is kind of giving you an outline of what that machine looks like, right? So, and then of course externally provided. So you want to make sure that who you're purchasing from is also following a quality management system. Again, the weakest link. If you're purchasing components that are out of control, you don't know what material. It could be aluminum one day, the next day it could be tin, right? So just again, so those things, you want to make sure that there's quality built into every little component that you purchase, and even your customer wants to make sure that you have that quality system built in when you sell them a product, because then they know that you're a trusted source. So these things, production, service, provision, things that we put in place for down the line after design, releasing those products officially, right? So there's always a process for this, and accountability and responsibility. We have departments that have to sign off all the way up to the top of your engineering, or if you're in a machine shop, the top of the machine shop manager and or owner, to make sure that the quality of those parts that are going out to the customer get reviewed. And is your process in place? Have you done all the steps to make sure that if you keep getting burrs in one specific area on the part, it's a very simple fix, of course, but is it something that the customer keeps coming back? Right? So is it something that you can put in place as a corrective action to put going forward? Okay, so these are, and again, this kind of breaks out to subclauses and so forth, and it does get very granular, which is good, because if you need some help and learning ways that you can do some development planning, you know, work with those inputs, what's your outputs, how are you verifying your design, and so forth. It kind of goes in and walks you through some of those best practices, if you will. Right? So, and you can implement those best practices, and this is, again, just a template. You can decide what that looks like for your company, right? So, so as we get a little bit into time, I'd like to jump from here and kind of talk about ways that we implement those changes. I'd like to show you an example of design my son and I have been working on, and he's kicking my butt. So, but he's been doing really well. He's been designing guitars in Fusion for about 3 years, and we now actually are starting to work together on some projects, because I'm adamant about making some cool ukuleles, because I love it, and I think it's fun and it's exciting to get into, and I love instruments and I love playing the uke. And so I think a part of this project we're working on together, we're building up this. We're using the quality management system to implement into our design. And today we're using Fusion, Fusion Team. And I'll show you some ways that we're planning it out and how we can implement these practices into our practice, right? So let's switch gears really quick. So I'm going to jump into, hopefully this has been helpful to kind of see into what the standard looks like, what some of these clauses are about, and how you can implement them into your business. Right, so it's really here to help you. These are ways and best practices to put in place to make sure you meet the customer requirements and their demands, and meet them with consistency and efficiency. Right, and that's what any engineer wants, and what any manufacturing company wants. So it makes sense to align your company with the standard. So let's jump into, I'd like to show you one example. I'm going to bring in, so this is Fusion. I started working on this cool design. I work at Autodesk, and I think it would be cool to have an Autodesk type ukulele. This one actually has some holes drilled in for the sound. Inside of here, I could show you, could take this piece away, but inside I'm basically shaping this so it's going to have the braces and stability inside that's going to mimic the opera house in Australia. So it points all the soundboard vibrations up through that little hole. I'm going to add some electronics in here behind the hole so that there's some LEDs that you could hold it up and it shines right through, right? So, and we can even, I'm excited, so we can even put in some ways that we can use our iPhone and a Bluetooth in there, maybe like a Raspberry Pi or something smaller maybe, that you can adjust to make the colors change. You can even record from inside of your ukulele. So these ideas just pop out. It's so much fun to explore, and we're doing it inside of Fusion 360, right? So we have these ideas. Now let's start to implement. We're at the phase where we're collecting customer requirements, right? So what does a customer need for a ukulele, and what do they look for as far as like components that go into it, and how can we meet those customer requirements and as we make them. So we have a small shop in the garage. We're going to start to cut some wood pieces. We're going to order fret wire and so forth. So how do you get started? Where do you start with that, right? So what I did is I took the standard and I started to put it in place, right? So this is a project that my son and I are sharing. We're both in Fusion Team. So I've decided I'm going to use Fusion Team to do that for the development process. So inside of a shared project, I can open this up. Let's say we want to jump into this Griffin gear here, and I can open this up on the web, and it brings me into, I actually want to open this in a different browser here, just so you guys can see a little bit better. So it opens up like this. I have this, this Fusion Team set up where we have this ukulele project, the one we're just looking at. And inside the ukulele project, I kind of started it off with a quality management system and just kind of plunked in a template, right? And in our template, we're filling out to match what makes sense for our business. So in this, I have broke it out to the different aspects, or let's say different departments that we would have to hold and work from, right? So first, of course, we have our quality management system. So I have a quality project in here, right? Regulatory. So if there's specific standards we have to meet for regulatory in the US, or if we decide we want to actually make them and sell them, you know, in other countries in Europe, what do we need to know? It's good to ask those questions ahead of time. And where is all this coming from? Our input requirements, right? Customer input requirements, design input requirements, regulatory quality input requirements, and manufacturing input requirements. So we capture all that. And then we build this out, right? So where do we capture it? Well, in quality. So if I go to my quality management, this is, I have a QMS, or in quality systems management. We now have those standards, right? So we have folders for the standards, and we can just start to plunk in what the standards would be for acoustic guitars, or acoustic products, product safety, MSDS sheets, and so forth. We're going to start to populate. We've already started this process. And then, of course, we have our quality system manual. And inside of here, we have the actual manual that's going to tell us, we write out exactly what we're going to do, how we're going to manage this. What are some of the steps within the manual? What are some of the things that we're going to implement, like a design and a quality process, like design management, documentation standards, drawing standards, the way that we're going to implement changes, like a request for change, engineering change, and how that trickles through, and then how do we get that change implemented to do it on the floor. So that's all within that quality system manual. We have inside of here are standard SOPs, right? So here, we'll visit one. So I want to make sure I capture our current proposed and archive. So I'm building this out using that framework from the template from ISO 9000. Plus, when we do get certified as an ISO 9000 company, we have audits. We set up audits just to make sure that we're following our procedures. We're doing what we're saying we're going to do. It's very helpful. It brings back knowledge to us where we have to improve. So it's often really good to have an external auditor, somebody external from your business who doesn't see the everyday and all the stuff we know we sweep under the rug. they see it and pull it out and say, why are you sweeping this? You could vacuum it, whatever. But it's great to have an external eye into the process, and they do an audit, and there's a standard way that they audit to make that process super simple and easy. Now, working in the medical world, sometimes those audits can be stressful. There's a lot of things that go on, and things that can go wrong, and there's also things where you want to get a good grade, right? You want to get a passing grade. You want a thumbs up. And there's places where we know we worry because there's places that we can always improve upon. But us being the people we are, engineers and people that get in our own heads, we worry about a lot of things. Now, worry's good. Worry shows you that it's important to you. So anyway, where people come in to do those ISO audits, the audit of your process, why not make it really easy and have it laid out that matches the standard, right? So that's what I'm laying out here. So they could just go into here, click here, and they have everything that they need for our business, right? Quality, regulatory, engineering, right? So inside of engineering, I can say, okay, I have a design history file, right? And not that you have to implement it this way. This is one way that I've learned and I work with, where we can archive things that we changed. If we're going to put serial numbers on our products, how is that serial number system implemented, and how does it relate back to your product? There's a standard for this, of course, an ISO standard, but how are we implementing that process? So as far as like a design history, we want to make sure that every step along the way, we've done the right steps. We've done the right things to make sure that we're ensuring that our customer feedback comes from a serialized component. We want to be able to relate directly back to that product, when it was made, how it was made, and what was in it. So part of that is capturing that history, not only specifically for every product, but the steps we took to implement that. We put into a design history, right? So verification, validation, places where did we make the change according to what was required that the customer is asking for? And if we made the change, did it work, right? Validation, verification. Verify that the change you made works. And we keep that history so that we can always go back and say, yes, I made that change. Here's how we tested it. Here's how we have, the next season, the next rev of products, here's how we made sure that they're going to work for the customer. It's not going to scrape their hand anymore, because we implemented and validated that we now shuttle all those frets. We file them down every single time before it goes out the door. And within that, I can always go back to this design history file, and I can find out exactly where that change was made and why we made it, right? So that's the important part. So in here, let's jump in, and let's say in engineering, we have project planning. Now, I've been using a project, and there's a lot of tools out there. Like, I've used Excel for a while. There's tons of tools, and really good tools out there that'll help you with your project planning. When are you going to implement what? I started to work with a product here at Autodesk. It's called Shotgun, and I can jump to that project directly through here. I go to the wiki page. I can open up a link directly through Fusion Team. Let's open it in a new window, and it brings me into this Shotgun interface. Now, Shotgun was developed, and it's a pretty awesome tool, but it was developed mainly for like video game design, movie design, motion picture design, that sort of flow. Like, what's the next snippet going to be, or this scene of this movie, I changed it, right? I did some CGI, and now the guy walks this way instead of this way, and you could see that connected directly to those assets. I've actually started to use it for designing and making ukuleles. I could see our whole history. I could see what goes on, what goes on in the product. I can see the forms, standard forms that we're using. And I can also plan it out. So if I go into our tasks, so my son and I think mostly me, but we actually have implemented some tasks. And as you can see, the tasks are done according to our QMS, right? So we're not there. I'm still building out the manufacturing, but for phase one, the first thing we need to do is capture customer requirements, customer input requirements. So over this time, we start our engineering revision change, right? So that I implemented our ECO, or our request for engineering change, our ECO, our change order. implementing a design, actually putting the design in through implementing it, making the design change, and then how we're verifying it. We're documenting everything, validating it, and as well as going to do a change release, right? So we review it, we check to make sure that we did the step that a customer is looking for. In this case, we're just going to implement customer input requirements. He and I are going to sit down, we're going to do a review, and we're going to say, did we meet all the customer requirements? So we started off, if I go into this implement, you can see some documentation. This isn't the one, but for my ECO, right? So I'm going to jump back into my tasks. And one of the ECOs was, okay, we need to implement this. So if I take a look at that, what is the document? We just started with like this Excel document and just started listing some of the different things, right? We just listed what's important for this guitar, in this case for ukulele. Listing out those things. It's just simply a list, right? And this turns into a document, right? We're going to make an official template. We do have an official template. And then we're starting to meet what we need for the customer. And that's going to be a living document going forward, right? So this is just an example. But that living document is going to capture, okay, for the fingerboard, what's the material? How are we using, how deep are those frets going? And all those things that are important to a customer, right? So, and then that's a design input requirement as well. And we have a phase for that as well, right? So for an example, we're making a change, right? So let me jump back into here. And like we talked about, the capability of the tuning pegs to stay tight, right? So we want to find some way here. That's a great example, right? So let me jump into, up in here, I have, down here, I have the neck design. So if we look at this, we can see when the phase for the neck design, and Aaron's responsible for that one. And we can see when he's working on it, right? He's gotten started in June, and we're going through verification, getting close to August. Towards the end of August, we should have that neck design implemented and ready for making, right? So he's going through and developing, making prototypes and so forth. And so down here, I have a change I need to make for the tuning pegs, right? So now if I look at this in the future, of course it's supposed to start in July. It looks like it did yesterday, which is good because I started it. And then it's going to go on till the end, right? So we have this milestone date. By September 1st, we want to be ready with our design, right? We want all requirements in place, which are back here, and we want that design. So let's say we're going to make some changes to the tuning pegs. The first thing I start with is just submitting an REC. The REC looks like this, a simple form, and this is just a page in Word, but of course you can make this a web page and link in, and I can even mark it up in here if we wanted to. But this is the REC, the request for change. Why are we changing it, right, for a standard, a requirement? So in other words, we want to get tuning pegs that are going to work. We want those tuning pegs that are going to be adherent to our design, right? So we want to use them that meet a certain requirement. And so now I can submit an REC, right? So that's the REC, and then that's a request for change. And now in the request then becomes the engineering change order, right? So again, we're putting in those different places. This is where it's the essence of a design. What's it look like, right? So if I say our task info and our versions, so I can actually click and I can bring this up and I can see that we've documented what type of, let me open this. What type of pegs are we going to use, right, for this design, right? So we can see we scoped out a few. There's it's Coro, right? Coro design. Coro makes these pegs that are exactly what we're looking for our uke, right? So we did some research, and now we want to implement that change. So within here, I could just jump to our design. I can open it up. There's the Coro pegs, right? So let's go and take a look at those. So I'm going to say this is our worm gears. So I'm going to jump into the page. There it is. And look, these are the tuners, and they were just recently certified ISO standard pegs. I would use these because I know that they're following a quality management system, right? So these are the pegs that we were going to spec out for this design. And if I want to implement that change and put them into our Fusion design, I could jump back into here and I can open up our Fusion design directly, right? So let's go back into our tasks. And I could jump back in and I could say, okay, I'm going to implement this design. Let's go and add it to our Fusion design. So through this task, I can now go in and open up and get directly to that Fusion design to start implementing that change, right? So now I can go and look at the Coro website, download their tuning pegs, or I can design them according to their specification and then purchase them. So here we're in Fusion Team. I can see our ukulele. There's our tuning pegs up here. Let me zoom out a little bit. So I can get an idea of what those tuning pegs would look like. Let me spin this around, actually. We'll flip it, right? So I'm going to go like this, and let me spin it around, and there we go. So now I want to see what those tuning pegs, now we can mark this up. I can start working in our design. We can collaborate. We can see what components are inside of a design in Fusion Team, right? So now I'm working with the tuning pegs. We can mark this up. We can get section view analysis. I can go into here and mark it up like this, and then start to add and say, we're going to change these out, and it can save it to our design. And now I can implement that. So now that's going to get saved with design. If I go back and I'm going to say I'm going to download, change out the tuning pegs, it becomes part of our ongoing design. I can save this in the ECO, and I can go back and track what we're doing as part of that whole ISO process. So if I jump back in, I'm going to make a change to that ukulele design. Let me go back into my tasks, right? So I can jump back into here and I can say, okay, now I'm implementing that change. And then the next step is to verify, to actually buy them, get them on the ukulele, use them, test them, see if they're going to work. If they don't slip, then they pass our test, right? We actually can make some test equipment in manufacturing, and that goes forward and becomes a manufacturing fixture that we can implement as we're doing this. We just go through the same process. We create a REC, an ECO to change it, and we're documenting everything that we're doing, and we're doing it in the standard way. We can always go back, take a look at our design. We have revision history within Fusion 360, and then we can always go back and see what that was at that earlier version, right? So let's take a look. We can go into here, and I could say version 11, made a change to the tuning pegs, added the user requirements, and then we can see each revision when we have the new pegs on here. And then each of those versions now becomes part of our design history file, right? So now we have a change that we implemented. Once it gets released, we save this back to our design history, and our device master record goes forward. So essentially, we built in directly into Fusion. If I go back up into our team here, we built in that quality management system directly into Fusion. So we could jump into our manufacturing requirements and open this up and find the machine data, any fixtures, right? So we can jump into our regulatory requirements, and we can see any approvals we need for release and so forth. And we could jump into all these different types of interfaces, right? Purchasing, if we want to purchase those, what is the one that we spec'd out? We can put some links in here to parts that we're buying, and then link it to our management system. So that's essentially the workflow for implementing and working with design from a quality management point of view. We covered our capabilities of being able to work on our design, how to implement design change throughout our design within Fusion 360. We are able to do project planning. I use a tool that's somewhat integrated, which is our Shotgun product, where you can actually plan out those different changes, and you can connect it to the ECO ECN process for release. You can do your design verification processes as well, and you can implement that design for change. You can work on it for manufacturing. So if you're going to make some changes that are going to affect fixtures, how you're going to purchase components, which components you're going to put in your design, you can keep that under control as well. The last part is the road to ISO 9001. It looks like we're at the end of our time here. You can always reach out to the ISO organization. You can download and find out the steps, and you can even get an outline similar to the one that I had that can walk you through what those different processes look like to implement.